Welcome to Tech presented by KYZEN, where we will explore common cleaning questions and answers. Let's get started. I would like to introduce KYZEN's own Ram Wissel.
Thank you, William, and welcome everyone to this week's edition of Tech to Tech. It's part 2 of our ESG series, and the topic is the impact on product availability and formulas. Well, and first off, what is ESG? Well, last week, part 1, our good colleague Beth Bivens gave a great Tech to Tech on introducing the topics, but just as a quick refresher, ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. Those are really the 3 tenets of ESG, but I like to simplify it and really think about it as sustainability. What are we doing to make sure that our products and the things that we do every day create that sustainable future? And going back to today's topics, we're really going to focus on potential impacts. How can ESG influence the development for the product development process? What are some maybe challenges in sourcing sustainable materials? What regulatory challenges affect product availability? And really, how does customer or consumer demand play on formulations and product needs? So we're going to start with an example of regulation. Back in the 1970s and 80s, Freon 141b was widely used to remove soldering residues from PCBs. And back then, all the electronics were really made with an RMA type solder paste, RMA fluxes, and they were cleaned in a vapor degreaser. This was a really elegant process. It was a waterless process. You take the assemblies, put them in a basket, basically drop that down into the boil sump or into the rinse sump, depending on the application, and it would clean the RMA flux, and the parts would come out nice and clean and dry. It was really good. Except, those materials, Freon, remember the hole in the ozone layer, it was bad. And so the Montreal Protocol came around and was passed in September of '87, but it really established this framework for removing or banning these ozone-depleting materials. So it dictated that HCFC-141b would be phased out by the end of the year 2002. Here we are today, and the ozone layer is healing because of that legislation. But that legislation fundamentally changed electronics manufacturing in a couple ways. It was really kind of the start of green legislation and some of these ESG concepts. Okay, and speaking of the Montreal Protocol, did you know that KYZEN was founded back in 1990 on April 1st? And it was out of an opportunity that arose directly out of the Montreal Protocol. Again, as that Freon waterless process was being phased out and banned, and we had some innovative rinsing and water rinsable cleaning solutions. And so, our genesis really came out of that ESG or the Montreal Protocol. And also, no clean solder paste stemmed from the Montreal Protocol. As the cleaning agents evolved, so did the solder paste materials, and no clean was really designed to leave minimal residues after soldering and encapsulate them in this polymeric shell that kind of provided a barrier of sorts against any ionic residues. And if you're making high reliability applications, there's a lot of information on why you probably want to be cleaning and why you're listening to our Tech to Tech series. So we'll save that for another day. But along with that, in the 90s and early 2000s, some RoHS legislation came around where it was also talking about making sure that materials didn't contain lead and several other metals that were bad for the environment. Kind of again in that ESG world. Well, new cleaning materials were certainly required to address these changes in the soldering paste. And so the market and the consumer demand evolved as well as it relates to those regulations. As we look back at the Montreal Protocol and the banning of HCFC-141b, KYZEN launched CYBERSOLV 141R as a replacement, and it was a safer non-ozone depleting alternative. And the primary cleaning agent, and it was a blend of an HFC material and an HFE material. We're not going to have a complete chemistry lesson on those, but those are important terms, HFC and HFE, when we think about ESG and regulatory concerns. So why is that? Well, if we fast forward about 20 years, they had the American Innovation in Manufacturing, or AIM Act of 2020. And what it did is these HFCs and the HFCs and HFEs were better than the CFCs that put the hole in the ozone layer, but the HFCs have a higher global warming potential. And it turned out that it's a key ingredient in our 141R. So as the EPA decided, well, let's reduce and phase down the availability or the use of HFCs by 85% in the coming years, we knew that this would impact the availability of that raw material, make it more difficult to obtain and also more expensive. So here again, regulations that are good for the environment, changing and saying, let's reduce materials with a high global warming potential, change to influence product availability. So some proactive changes. Well, we looked at that and said, okay, well, what do we have that we can use instead of an HFC? It's an HFO, a hydrofluoroolefin. These were becoming more and more popular because they have zero ozone depleting fat potential and a global warming potential of 1, much, much lower than the HFCs. And so proactively in 2019, we released the CYBERSOLV 141X, was an HFC cleaner, HFC-free cleaner. And as part of that, we do a lot of testing. It turned out that it actually improved cleaning performance because the HFOs had better solvency characteristics than the HFCs. So this was a win for the environment and a win for the customer as well. And everything, were we going to roll along for the next 18, 20 years? Well, some things happened right around Christmas time of 2022, where 3M decided to exit manufacturing PFAS materials by the end of 2025. And around Christmas time, 2025 seemed a little ways off, but right now we're almost halfway through that year. And a lot of you maybe watching this today are being influenced by that change of them abandoning or getting out of the PFAS or the HFE market. So really quickly, what is a PFAS? It stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Again, that's a bit of a tongue twister, so they just shorten it to PFAS. But really think of these as forever chemicals. And there's other editions of our Tech to Tech that have been specific to this, and also Dr. Adams spoken about them as well. Well, and in our spirit of continuous improvement, we introduced CYBERSOLV 141K as a PFAS-free material. And it says there on the slide, PFAS-free as defined by the US EPA. This is important because the definition of what is a PFAS varies from country or region, Europe to China to the US, or even some states, a little bit differently. And it's all about chemical structure and bonding. But it really incorporates the latest in this long line of environmentally or greener solvents. And so I like this chart because it starts out back with Freon 141b was really used in the 70s and 80s, and it went to the transition to the HCFCs, which were a little bit better, and then the HFCs and the HFEs, which were really in that 141R product. And then because of global warming potential, they transitioned to the HFEs and HFOs. Because of PFAS concerns, it's really now in the HFOs and HCFOs. So you see this long trend of continuous innovation and improvement being driven by environmental concerns and regulations. So you're looking at this and saying, well, what are some of the resources that might be available? I'm not just doing vapor degreasing. I'm doing a lot of other types of cleaning in my manufacturing. Well, IPC 1402 is the standard for greener cleaners. It's a great resource. It defines some terms and acronyms, and it establishes some minimum criteria. We actually participated in the working group on this, and the scope includes things from PCB assembly to screen and stencil processes, reflow and maintenance, stripping of coatings, and more. It's a really good resource, an educational tool. Also, IPC just launched their Evolve website at Apex of 2025 just a couple weeks ago. It takes the IPC 1402 and really builds on that in the whole concept of sustainability. So appreciating that's a great resource. Additionally, there are things like eco labels and certifications that apply more specifically to products. A common one you might see around the industry is green screen certified. That means that an independent nonprofit entity or certification body has reviewed the product and all the ingredients and said that these are made using PFAS-free and preferred chemicals that are safer choice. So there's 6 gold certified products that are available right now, including our leading Aquanox A4727, and more are pending. We're working towards making sure our formulators are looking at these materials and what satisfies that certification so that new products can be released that have that label. And there are also things like the TCO certification, which means it's a global sustainability certification for IT products. When you booted up your laptop this morning, you probably, if you look closely at the bottom of the screen somewhere, it might say TCO certified. And that meant it was all built with certified and more environmentally preferred chemicals and components. So really, when I think back about all this, you really want to partner with a supplier that shares your focus for sustainability. And again, that's reacting to the solder materials, your process, and innovating on products that are going to be around for a while. So with that, we're going to take a couple of frequently asked questions. And the first one is, well, okay, Ram, I've been affected by the PFAS or 3M decision, and I'm working now to qualify new materials. How can I be confident that the work that I'm going through right now I won't have to go through this ugly process again right away? Well, again, what you're going to want to do is partner with someone that's looking at the most sustainable materials and things that are in future regulations. And again, like that AIM Act, it was going to phase things down by 85%, but it wasn't, in 6 months, it was going to be over several years. I think it was 8 or 10 years. And so there's normally a runway, just like with the Montreal Protocol. It was passed in 87, but some of the restrictions or the final banning was in the early 2000s. So these normally have some runway. But you want to be working with someone that understands the regulations and what's on the horizon and is helping develop products and with that vision ahead. Second question is, well, why is the IPC 1402 titled the standard for greener cleaners rather than just calling something green? And again, that really gets back into this concept of continuous innovation. What might be green today could be may not be tomorrow, or how do you get from I don't have maybe the perfect green choice available to me today, but how can I be greener than where I am right now? What can I do as an incremental step to get better, to have a more sustainable process and be a little bit better all the way around? The next question is, well, my current cleaner isn't green screen certified. Is that okay? And yes, absolutely. There's nothing requiring you to use green screen certified products. But know that as the market is working towards developing new products, we're trying to use materials that will meet that certification. So again, if your product qualification cycles, maybe 10 years and you're only 5 years in, that's fine. You don't need to change. But as you start to look at those new materials, odds are that the products you're going to be considered in the future are green screens or similar certified. So that's okay. And then finally, well, what about recycling? Well, this is a great topic. And actually, it's a topic that my colleague and good friend Kelly Finch is going to be talking about in next week's Tech to Tech. So I really encourage you to turn in, and he's going to be talking the third part of our ESG series about recycling and carbon credits and renewable things. So thank you very much for tuning in. And William, we'll pass it back over to you.
Thanks, Ram. Thank you guys for watching this Tech to Tech session. If you would like to discuss this topic further or have any questions not answered in this session, please contact your local KYZEN regional manager or send an email to tech@kyzen.com. And we will have someone follow up with you as soon as possible. And if you like this video, be sure to follow us on our social media platforms for more expert cleaning content.